to other women out there. I'm 26, I'm from Dublin, I have 2 children. I've been in a relationship for 3.5 years with a guy who I thought was the love of my life.
Hi, my name is Shonda Williamson. First I will start by saying I was in an abusive relationship for almost 10 years.
So this video is about my abusive relationship that I was in. How old was I? I was probably, I think I was 18 to 19. It was 18 to 19.
Some victims don't manage to escape in time. On February the 11th, Haneli Huayucho, a young journalist, died after she was stabbed at least a dozen times in front of her young son. The main suspect, her husband, was a policeman. The case has become a rallying point for anti-violence campaigners furious after a surge in such murders. 120 women in Bolivia were killed by their husband or partner last year.
My name is Carmen Cuevas. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been a social worker for about over a decade, and I've been providing services to families from case management to now direct in the private practice, seeing clients here for individual or family therapy. I primarily have been working with victims that are women, Latina victims. Because I'm Latina and Spanish speaking, I get a lot of referrals for clients from the community that are in need of therapy, or when I worked in CPS or other agencies before opening my own private practice, I did work with the myriad of ethnicities, African American, Latino, Caucasian, primarily has been women who have been identified as victims, and the children, of course, of those victims. The link between violence and mental health, there's a very strong correlation with mental health. Depression, it really correlates. When there's violence and you're being mistreated as a human being, it can really be an impactful impact on your mental health. It's difficult to work, it's difficult to focus, it's difficult to feel joy and happiness when you're dealing with something at home that's so shameful and hurtful and dehumanizes your spirit, basically. Their spirit starts really becoming more gray, and victims you start noticing them, and sometimes they start dressing the way they used to. They don't enjoy the things they used to, so that really contributes to that that depression. With abuse, there could be anything physical. It's the one I think most people relate to. It's the physical abuse, the actual physical scars that people associate with domestic violence, but it's emotional. It's the emotional can be the manipulation, the coercion, isolating women, victims in this case, from family, from medical care, from job, employment, seeking their opportunities for them to grow. So it could be that as well, emotional, just being really limiting a victim from doing and being who they are. And so a lot of times you'll see that, and those are the most difficult, I think, unnoticed population that you see with victims, that the scars are very physical representation of what's going on, but the emotional scars are the ones that we don't really get to see.
That domestic violence is very serious. Sometimes it starts off with a push, but a lot of times if the suspects are willing to push you, it progresses, and that's what I've seen. I've responded to many of the same victims, and it started off with a push or a shove, and next they're getting struck or punched with objects and hurt pretty bad. Well, when we arrive at the scene, we usually separate the two parties, and if we determined a crime has occurred, especially when it involves domestic violence, we are going to remove the most primary aggressor out of the two in the parties, and one would be typically taken to jail. What they're going to end up doing is usually they'll call 911 and we'll respond back. If that person is there by law, because it is a restraining order is a court order, by law, we have to take that person into custody and they will be going to jail. If they're not there, we will complete a report and a warrant for their arrest will be put out. As far as our response, for sure we always respond with at least 2 officers, a 2-officer unit or 2 separate single officer units to domestic violence scenes, and sometimes more, depending on what type of scene we're going to be arriving on. For instance, if it's involving a knife or any type of weapon, we're definitely arriving with more than 2 officers and a plan in place. Typically we'll arrive a distance away, maybe half a block from the scene, formulate a plan on what we're going to do and what action we're going to take, and then go ahead and follow through with the plan and contact the victim or the parties at the scene. One of the toughest scenes that I arrived on was it was actually a domestic violence that involved a murder, which happened in North Park in San Diego. So I arrived on scene, and it was a husband-wife incident to where the husband killed the wife, shot her to death. So that was one of my toughest scenes to arrive on that and seeing that and witnessing that. But yeah. We end up providing, as far as services for domestic violence victims, we provide them with a pamphlet when we arrive on scene that gives a whole list of outreach centers. There's even, I believe it's in Linda Vista area, there's even, if it's a very bad situation where the victim needs a place to stay, they even have shelters for abused victims. They even have plans in place to where there's kind of, I guess we'd call them safe houses, to where victims could go and the suspect has no information on the whereabouts of the victim.
I think more than anything, it's really being supportive, and it's difficult. It's the most difficult things to stand. It's like watching a car crash and not looking. It's like instinctively you want to say something, you want to encourage them, like, this person's abusing you. But I think more than anything, it's more than the question, is the relationship. There needs to be a connection with you first before you can make a correction with anyone. So it's very important for victims to feel supported and not judged. So more than a question, I think it's more of a feeling that when you're aware something's going on, it's not the time to start preaching to them what they should do. It's a time for them to really, for the community to support and love them and support them and say, when you're ready, I know something's going on, but when you're ready to talk to me, I'll be here for you.
Rex is ready. Get set. Go.
So it's always important to say, hey, have an extra set of keys, have an extra set of clothes, things that you may need, so that when you're ready to leave, you have them stored somewhere that's safe, whether it be a friend, whether it be whoever. So when you leave, you don't have to leave packing everything. You already have stuff there. You have your IDs, you're slowly preparing yourself to leave.
So what I'd like to get out to them victims, people of domestic violence, is that make sure they call in if they're harmed in any way, if they're pushed, shoved, call it in, and don't take it for granted that it's just going to stop. If that person, if the other half is not willing to seek counseling, it might be time to think about ending the relationship.